Nice.
You good? Sweet.
Yeah, I'm going.
All right, sweet. Me too, baby.
Cool beans.
All right, so I feel like this is already a very like biased sort of schedule. Just being like, oh yeah, no, this week we're gonna do Chard, and then it's gonna be Pinot, and it's gonna be Riesling, and it's gonna be Champagne. It's just all shit that we like. When do we get to do like jammy, shitty California cab with like way too much oak or Chilean? We could do Chilean too, or Australian. There's so many options.
We should do
shit we don't
Chilean.
like. Should do Chilean cabs.
Yeah.
Chilean cabs, $7 and under.
I drank a bunch of
just...
Chilean cab like 5 years ago.
I
was visiting my then girlfriend in Chile, and I'll tell you what, the wine is cheap, and much of it deserves to be.
Nice.
Yeah. You know what? You know it's a crazy varietal that we should definitely do an episode on. Carmenere.
Oh yeah, we should.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is pretty cool.
Just a big old brick of tannins straight to your mouth face. I
would get Carignan and Carmenere mixed up. Or I used to, and then I was like, no, I need to know what these are. And I was like, oh, I don't like Carmenere.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Like, oh, this is the one I don't like. But also, I'll say that, and then, whatever. I didn't like Sauvignon Blanc for a while. I mean, I didn't hate it, but I just wasn't crazy about it. And then I'd have one that was really good. I'd be like, oh shit, this is incredible. So
yeah, there have to be those varietals out there though that you try and you have all these moments, that you're like, maybe someone's doing this really really well, and it's like, I don't know, maybe I just need to be more exposed to it, and then someday, someday late in life, you look back at all the tricks the world has played on you, and you're like, no, fuck you, that varietal sucks shit.
Yeah,
it's bad.
Like, no, maybe if I spend, maybe instead of spending 20 on this kind, maybe I should spend 30. No, maybe I just haven't had good ones yet. And before you know it, you're spending like $80 on bottled Bordeaux, and you're like, oh, I don't like this.
Yeah.
I just don't like this or Sangiovese. I don't. No, that's not fair. It's not fair.
You think that's how? Yeah. You think that's how people get into like bad marriages and shit?
I mean, I think it's slightly more complicated than that, but it's probably exactly the same as that.
Yeah, let's stick
probably the same thing.
Let's stick with making sure that all of our metaphors and comparisons are wildly overconfident in their accuracy.
Yeah.
Bear no responsibility to the actual shape and complexity of the things that they are built upon.
Nice. All right, so what do you? What are you drinking?
So I have a bottle of 2015 Irie Vineyards Willamette Valley Peeno Noir, and any number of other Oregon Pinots that we might want to have an opinion about. Mm-hmm. And by that I mean my opinion.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, I feel like our palates are pretty closely aligned on a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And then eventually, we'll need to do like an Oregon mini like Oregon. I mean, we're biased, but
yeah. I don't know. Well, I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know either.
Hey, don't come in here waving those big words around like bias. Bias. Is
that one? Just like some Southern hick, just thinking it has like way more than 4 letters.
I don't know what you're talking about with my unconsidered bias. I haven't been doing none of that lately. That is horribly offensive. That was a very.
Listen, they're fine. They're fine down there.
Yeah, they don't
have as much corona as everybody else does. That's a gross generalization. I'm sure they do.
No, it's really bad. Apparently Louisiana's not doing well. Florida's fucking fucked, man.
Yeah. I was looking. I was looking at Reuters today. They had this this interactive map. And it was, I think New Jersey was like the second highest with like 16,000 confirmed cases. And I was like, dang, that's a lot, And the highest was New York with 66,000. And I was like, wow, yeah, well, that's just like confirmed cases. Because Lord knows, we all know like 10 people who were like, no, yeah, my friend had a fever, but went to the doctor. And the doctor was like, yeah, no, I'm not testing you. I'm not gonna do that. So it's cool. We can trust these numbers, right?
Yeah. Oh no, I think the whole world has gotten together and all the world leaders got together, sang "Kumbaya" a few times, and agreed that there will be no fudging of numbers. That's for damn sure. No one's gonna be playing it fast and loose with the old decimal places when it comes to notating how many fucking dead they have.
How many dead corpses? So here's I haven't spent as much time on 4chan as I would want to. I'm far too busy.
As you claim in your CV.
As I claim. Yeah. Right. But I like to imagine that there are people like the people who are like, the enlightened folk who know about like the inner workings of the George Soros and Hillary Clinton campaign. Like,
they know they know the passcode on the like digital keypad at the Pizzagate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I like to know people who are attuned to that sort of like book of knowledge, sort of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I like to think that they have a demographic breakdown of all the people who have gotten and died from coronavirus, and I'm sure it's like all evangelical, like Southern Baptists, like all Trump's base, and they're like, oh, this was constructed by George Soros and Hillary Clinton to kill all the Trump supporters just in time for the 2020 elections so that Joe Biden can make Hillary Clinton his vice president and he will kill himself on national television and she'll be the reigning, fucking
Grand Poobah of the New World Order.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Why can't I? Oh, man.
So there's
Medusa. That's what I was thinking.
Oh, yep.
She's going to become the,
Yeah. There is a element to 4chan that you always have to keep in mind, which are the people on it who were so intent on harassing Shia LaBeouf that they like made him move this piece of like performance art protest he was doing out into the middle of a forest, and then he was shooting footage of this flag he'd made, and they kept defacing the flag was the thing. Like different people on 4chan were apparently daring other people to go mess with Shia LaBeouf's flag.
Nice.
And he moved it to this forest with a webcam on it, but it was angled up so you could see the sky behind it, and they used passing planes to triangulate based on flight path trajectories where the flag must have been.
Wow.
And went and defaced it there. So there is some there is some layer of 4chan that is truly horrifying where like this perfect combination of like intelligence, skill, and dedication and expendable time combine to create just the dumbest anecdotes ever, because they're never going to do anything like meaningful or actually like accidentally just pitch perfectly onto the internet the network and structure and plans of the New World Order. But they'll probably get close.
They will. Yeah.
The problem is you just have to know where to stop with any given theory before. I mean, usually, like once you've seen George Soros' name, you've gone too far.
Yeah.
So what are you thinking on your end?
So perfect timing to segue back into this.
Yep.
I've got a Ant Hill Farms 2016 Peeno Noir from Sonoma Coast. And then I have a Domaine Philippe Livera 2015 Cotonui Village. And so it's Peeno Noir. Yeah, so it's a Peeno Noir.
Domaine Philippe Rivera?
Yeah. Oh, no, Livera. Livera.
All right. Yeah. Livera.
Yep.
Cotonui Village.
Yep, 2015. And I am guessing, from what I remember, because they're in the fridge, because they were a little too warm. But that's another thing we should talk about at some point. I mean, wine temperature is very important. And if you go somewhere and the wines are they're too hot, it's disgusting. and the white wines are too cold, and it's like you can't taste them. So there's a balance,
Yeah.
And generally speaking, like the fuller reds, you want them, the warmer that you want. The fuller the reds, the warmer you want them, but you still don't want them any warmer than like 65 degrees. So like you want it colder than you'd think, but not like, obviously don't stick them in the fridge for like fucking 3 hours or something. But like what I would do is like, because it used to be room temperature, but I think that's probably before there was heat, So so
when rooms were just cubicles of stone.
Exactly, yeah. And there were tapestries covering all the walls to keep the heat in. Yeah, everyone had one of those,
Yeah. At any given moment, you could,
right,
commit a murder from Hamlet by stabbing one out of any of the heiresses.
Right. Anyway, so what I would do, like what I'm doing now, I have it, whatever, I had the wine out, right, just sit in room temp before I would drink it, stick it in the fridge for like, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes or something. That's if it's like a I don't know, Beaujolais or a Pinot of some sort, or Trousseau, or I don't know, anything that's like light bodied and red. Maybe like a Cab Franc if you want. Maybe don't do 20 minutes, maybe do 10 minutes or something. But yeah, a nice like juicy Grenache from Sardinia. Oh, those are the shit.
Yes.
Anyway, that's not what we're talking about right now. So, so I don't know. Do we want to talk a little bit about like Old World Pinot versus New World, just stylistically, because obviously people can like spend their entire lives studying Burgundy and they won't like know everything there is to know. So we should be able to cover it in about 40 more minutes, right?
Yeah, no problem.
Piece of fucking cake.
It's gonna be easy as
We know virtually nothing combined. No.
What are you gonna?
Yeah. So I mean, I guess it's sort of characteristically the same sort of thing, like Old World, New World. Old World's sort of like, obviously a generalization, but tend to be lower alcohols, a little bit like higher acid, not as like super fruit or oak driven, more like savory aspects kind of. Whereas New World is a bit more like forward, or like more aromatic and fruit dominating sort of, and then more of like a liberal usage of oak sometimes. That's kind of, whatever, like the it's not always the case. Obviously, you can find Old World producers that make wines in New World style, and New World producers who make wines in Old World style, and it's so. But I mean, if whatever, 9 out of 10 dentists say that. Oh fuck! There was this one that was on my fridge in college. I don't fucking remember. It doesn't make any sense. But anyway, like the majority of the time, that's the case.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, there are some Old World producers that it's an interesting, like, just in terms of like wood character. One of the interesting things there is like some Old World producers do use a whole bunch of oak. It just doesn't tend to define the wines as much, which has to do with other. Like, it's one of the reasons that the basic distinction is a very like complicated one, because it kind of falls into these traps of generalization, which are, I mean, they bear weight, but
because there's a ton of producers in Burgundy who use 100% new oak. Like there's a ton of them. They're it tastes like
it's there's this whole problem with a basic understanding that anyone looking at wine objectively from a scientific point of view would probably take, which is that terroir should matter, and like big differences in terroir, like the sort of soil content of Burgundy and the aspects of Burgundy and the age of a lot of those farming practices, or at least the identity of the culture there with those farming practices, is just a huge impact on all of that can't really be like dissociated from it. Versus, the very physical realities of all of those things, versus the very different winemaking styles that go into Old World versus New World mentality. Like the classic, like the classic idea being that, in Burgundy and like it's the meat and potatoes of stories, like what is in like Somme as a documentary where like they just want to
Yeah.
they want to point out all of these old world ideas, like the way that they ferment or the vessels that they ferment in, and how they're, you know, it's sometimes averse to technology or stuff like that, and so much of that's just basically marketing on a pretty like disparate scale. It's like defining New World and Old World in terms of like the palate that like most people will come to wine with. It's basically impossible because like you can't really compare wines that have been made like you can't really compare wines across price point really well, because what that means from old world stuff versus new world stuff is very like it's just very muddled. So you might be tasting like, because there's no cruise system in any new world place, like that's so the biggest I guess the biggest thing that like does functionally in terms of the wines people can buy differentiate new world and old world is something they can't really like. It doesn't enter into blind tasting or anything like that. It's just what are you buying when you buy wine. And if you spend a lot of money when you're buying old world wine, you're usually buying something that like has all kinds of legal terminology associated with it, like written into the laws of the country it comes from. There are rules about what that wine is and where it comes from. Whereas in America, when you spend more money on wine, all you're getting is prestige, which is true as well with old world stuff. But like at least with old world stuff, there's a lot of burden of proof. In theory, you know, it becomes complicated when you think about like how little Grand Cru Burgundy is drunk in France anymore, which it turns out is like, besides Paris, like very very little.
Well, of course, they can get a higher price for it somewhere else. There's greater demand. Of course, they're going to want to ship it out.
But all the things you said in terms of like experiencing wine on the palate, they're functionally like very very true with Pinot Noir. It's just such a complicated like people can like, I know plenty of people who are like, oh yeah, how, like, is it New World or Old World? And they're like, oh, I could tell it was New World. And they're like, oh, how did you know it was New World? It's like, oh, it was clean. Because like the joke among a lot of people is like a lot of Old World wineries have, you know, little like like they'll have more VA, or they'll be more comfortable with like some margin of Brett. But but yeah, in terms of like, I think it gets very I don't know, it is very much related to just like one of the strangest echelons of like basically colonialism or like imperialism. Like what do you like just the terms New World and Old World are funny because like one New World wine growing region that grows really like pretty renowned Pinot Noir, or like other French varietals, you know, consistently very well, is South Africa, and their wine growing history is like, you know, at least as old as modern Burgundy, like modern Burgundy and modern Bordeaux in terms of winemaking. Like they're still owned, especially in like the case of Bordeaux. Like there's still ownership ties to, you know.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah,
certain things, but like the winemaking science, or like the current industry, like the shape of the industry currently in like Australia or South Africa is, you know, perfectly comparable because it goes back, you know, several decades at this point. That was a huge digression. Me mostly just saying like I agree with you, but I want to complicate the point.
Totally. No. I mean, that's just further. That's like refining it. I think that's, you know, that's a good start in a generalization. But yeah, like it varies a lot, and like you're saying, since there's all those regulations, I think I found you're more likely to have. Well, I don't know. This is like another generalization, but I've found like I'm more likely to have variability in like New World producers from the same region than I would in like Old World. You know, like if I have 2 bottles of like I don't know, like Gevrey Chambertin, or 2 bottles of like Vosne Romanée or something, and then I have 2 bottles from like I don't know, maybe Eola Amity's not a good, maybe like Yamel Carlton or something like that. Like the styles can be so widely different just because like, all right, you can grow things completely differently, and you can do whatever spacing and like all that kind of shit. Like it can be vastly different.
Yeah.
And you can plant whatever you want, and you could put fucking some Pinot Noir. Wait, what's the breakdown for Oregon Pinot? Does it have to be like?
I think it's still like
90 or 95. Yeah,
it's either 90 or 95.
Yes, but then you could put like 5%. I don't know, like Tanat or something like ridiculous in there.
Yeah.
And there's huge variability, but and because like knowing what producer you like, it becomes important. But so I don't know. So so with keeping with that in mind, sort of, I think for me at least, I think like red Burgundy or Pinot Noir from Burgundy rather than, sort of generally speaking, it's similar if you have it in like Loire Valley or Champagne or whatever. But the thing I really like about it is the balance of all like the savory and herb and sort of fresh fruit and the like mushroomy forest floor, all that kind of stuff that's sort of like cliche to say, but they're present in Pinot around the world, but I think in Burgundy there's like this really beautiful balance and finesse that they're all present there. It's like you can have like, I don't know, if you have like a spice rub or something and you have like, let's say salt, black pepper, paprika, mustard, and cumin or something like that. Like, yeah, you might have all those same ingredients, but they can be in like completely different proportions in one rub versus another one, and the product's extremely different. So I feel like it's that sort of same thing with Pinot Noir. So like a lot of Oregon Pinots and California Pinots that I've had do have the same like similar cherry flavors and whatever earthy stuff, but like instead of being like a tart cherry, it might be like a riper or lusher sort of cherry or something like that. So yeah. I mean, it's the same thing, different expression, but with that in mind, you can still very much tell, like, oh, this is Pinot Noir, regardless of kind of where it's grown, and it's also very a great expression of terroir, like you're saying, and very site specific. And I think that's one thing that's so interesting about it and beautiful about it. A lot of people have mentioned before is that it's very like the terroir is very transparent with both Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. I think that's one reason that Burgundy is really special. Yeah,
Pinot Noir and Chardonnay are both great. I think they're so vaunted as varietals. Like they're so deeply valued because they are so hard to like. It's so hard to destroy the terroir of either of those varietals in the long run. Like it might not be super apparent when they're really young, and that'd be something that I'm sure anyone in Burgundy wouldn't mind being said. It's something that's more complicated in like a new world, wine market. But because that is actually a big difference that you could draw between the two is the markets surrounding new world and old world wines, and that relating to their costs. But so with Pinot and Chardonnay, they both present very real challenges to vintners. Like you can't just trust that you're going to get good wine out of those grapes if they haven't been grown well, and if you're going to just kind of not make certain choices when fermenting them. Like you don't have a whole lot of choices when making wine, in my opinion. Like you do have very important choices, but you don't have a huge number of them. And both Pinot and Chardonnay, you really have to make those choices. And there aren't wrong answers, but those are the very definitive like winemaking moves that you then you make. And then somewhere down the road, the terroir of both Pinot and Chardonnay tends to kind of predominate. As long as the choices you made were coherent, like if all the choices you made led to an ultimately stable wine, then over time, I think the dream everyone has is over time, terroir predominates. All the choices you made, helped make it an appealing wine to that moment, and then it lives, however long it can in that secondary phase of life where it's great aged wine. I think that I'm really talking out my ass at this point, but that's like
I know what you're saying.
I think that's what people's goals are with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, because like they both have this very tenacious relationship with how soon you can drink them versus how long they will last if they're made really, really well.
Right.
And other certainly bigger red varietals, like Pinot Noir exists in this very cool, tense space between the big red varietals that people would tell you not to drink for 10 years, and the very light red varietals that some can age a long time, but for most of them, you're looking at drinking them relatively early. Beaujolais, like Gamay being the probably best example of that. Certainly with like, I haven't drunk a whole lot of Cinsault or other lighter reds, but my impression is you're not supposed to age them as long. But yeah, I think going back to what you were saying, it's like Pinot and Chardonnay pair really well because they exist right in this mid ground where you can make the spectrum within what each of those are and can be is surprisingly broad, but still very still very definite. Like it's still a very navigable place.
Right. Yeah, I think what you're saying about winemaker, or in your opinion, when you're making wine, you have you have few options, and what like decisions you really have and what control you really have. And I feel like that itself is sort of like an old world mentality because
that's true.
I've like literally heard some people say, I was in one winery in Virginia. Maybe 2 months ago or something, and whatever. But the guy was like, "Yeah, no, my daughter's." It was like he wasn't like tasting us; he was tasting these other people. When I overheard it, and he was like, "Yeah, no, my daughter goes to like UC Davis now," and he was like really proud of her. I'm like, "Oh, that's great," And he was like, "Yeah, and like they're so far advanced with winemaking now. It's like they've pretty much shown that like they used to think terroir, like it's not. It's all. It doesn't matter. It's all just it's technology is what matters. It's just technology, and like that is." Your opinion. That's wrong, but it's your opinion. Like, okay, so you're telling me you can take you could just take Welch's, right? Chapitalized Welch's. And then you could put the right yeast in, and then add all these different things to it, right? Ferment it, and you'll get something beautiful. Like, I have a hard time believing that.
And I don't even know if it's... I don't think it's not true, but the waste, to accomplish that, you will waste so much, and you need so much to work with. So,
you think you could do that?
I think you can with certain varietals. Basically, the Welch's thing. I don't know if that.
No. That's obviously like an offensive example, but
but it's valid in that it's. I mean, it really all has to do with like negotiating people's expectations and people's people's perceptiveness with wine, because while
you can taste when a wine's been acidified.
Yeah, you can taste when all kinds of stuff has been done to a wine, but the truth, I think, of all of it that people are like going for is is wanting to maintain that argument that there is something fundamentally different about wine when you make only those old world type choices, like only the few choices that present themselves when you don't have any but the most basic technology. Because like in theory, in theory, all you would need is a pit made of some relatively clean, like uniform material without that would hold liquid, and then a shovel, and a pit, a shovel, and then a
Ford pickup truck.
Sure, yeah, that's something.
You need her. How else are you gonna get her done?
I don't know how you're getting. You just need a pit, and you need to get her done. Because
it's a cut-off denim jacket.
Yeah,
you need what else? You get just a belt buckle is cliche, but you need a belt buckle that like defies belt buckle standards, ambitions.
So
perspectives.
So basically, like all the tech, like Yeah, it's like belt. It literally like belt buckles. Like it's like what is the fanciest technology you have access to, and what do you want that to do to other people's perception of how big your penis is? Because what is a belt buckle for if not to draw attention to the undercarriage, as it were? But yeah, like
it's poetry.
But yeah, like wine technology
reminds me of that banana cooking passage in Gravity's Rainbow I read this morning.
Yeah,
a lot of banana talk going on.
Coat the hungover stomachs of all England.
Had my mouth watering for more than one reason. Hashtag GBR.
Hashtag GBR. Gravity Boys Rainbow.
Nice.
Fun. I think I mentioned this to you when you were a while ago. But that passage, great foreshadowing. Bananas, only parabola-shaped fruit.
There you go.
Yeah, baby. That I know
We're
of.
talking about winemaking technology.
There's also plantains. Oh, well, it's all about giving yourself more choices, like more points where you can make another choice that will improve the wine. Because that's in terms of wine science, grapes having a really high volume of tartaric acid in them as compared with basically any other fruit, and compared with the rest of the constituent, the balance of sugars to tartaric acid in wine grapes makes it uniquely valid as a preservable product, and that developing that relationship just in the grapes, and then doing as little as you need to once you've picked the grapes, winemaking technology is all about doing something to solve a choice you made earlier. When you pick the grapes is the first choice you make, right? If discounting, which is obviously a bad idea, but discounting all the choices the farmer's already made. Most of the people saying anyone who's saying it's all about technology is basically doing that anyways, because when you're growing grapes, when you're growing wine, it is not all about technology. It is all about the plant. Because you can't solve what the plant is doing. It's like anecdotal piece of thing about science is that we haven't in a lab been able to make a facsimile of wood. We can't produce wood. We don't, as far as I know, we don't have a lab process for synthesizing that compound. And
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's a really fascinating problem, right? And the way that a vine develops a cluster of grapes is something that you can't fake. So you have all this technology to track the vine and what it's doing, and what minerals are involved, and what its pathways are, and you can do all kinds of study of its hormonal ebbs and flows and all that. But ultimately, you are going to have to make choices along the growing, the 100 days that from bloom to harvest. You're going to have to make your choices in that window that that define basically what happens that year. That's the human element of terroir too, is you make choices. Not making a choice is its own choice, and that's a big part of the old world mentality in Burgundy was you just grow it like any other plant, you just get it through the season until you pick the grapes, is what I've been told. I don't know if that I don't think that holds true in a lot of places. There are a lot of places with really intensive farming practices and whatnot, but you have this technologic process that you're just trying to guide so that you hit this window of time that you can pick the grapes in, and that's when the winemaker they're tracking in that last few weeks, maybe just couple weeks before that choice is made, to try and nail it. And they're taking samples from the vineyard, and they're running as many numbers as they can, and all that technology. Again, there is this big debate among people well, if it's just technology, then you can get the numbers that you need and you can pick on numbers. And Then there are other people who are like, no, I pick on flavor. Like I go out and I sample and I want to know that the juice tastes right. And that it's a very that is a very real divide in how wine gets made, is people who pick on numbers and people who pick on flavor and like what the vines look like. And saying like, yeah, it's all technology is basically saying, going back to that first choice that the winemaker's actually making, that the winemaker's actually like really going to be involved in, is saying like, well, we can solve for things we did when making that choice. And the most basic interventions after that are like, you pick early, the vine didn't develop enough sugar in the berries, so you just go and buy sugar and put it into the ferment like early as possible. Because the earlier you make that choice, the better, the less your choice will show, because enough things happen between each choice you make early, enough things happen between that choice and the wine in bottle that choice becomes more and more obscured. Like the earliest choices have the biggest impact, but the more obscured they can be by the rest of the process that happens. So, like with, it just bugs me when people say like, it's just about technology, because there's this very beautiful timing that exists in getting to know vines that are going to be growing grapes and stuff, and then getting to know the way that the wines or the grapes from those plants ferment into wine. And there are all of these like very just characteristic things about ebbs and flows with the season, if you know what the season is, where the timing, if you just get the timing right, you don't have to make a whole bunch of choices. Like, you don't have to acidify if you get the timing right. And there are going to be seasons where maybe that moment won't actually happen that you hope for. And then there are other seasons where that moment happens a couple of times, and you have a couple of good windows to go and harvest it. But, saying it's just about technology is saying I can manufacture more choices for myself in this process. And that's,
well, and even that there's no difference between, or like the choices, the more choices that I give myself, or will make just the same difference as it would have if I had farmed like consciously or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which I think is like, comes down to the fact that it's like, all right, well, can you manufacture this this fruit that comes in to conditions that it would have been in if you had maintained the vineyard differently?
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, maybe you could adjust like the tartaric acid or the sugar content, but like, what about the zillions of other compounds you're not testing for?
Yeah.
Which I think is something we talked about last time. So it's like, in theory, sure, it just comes down to like, it's just like different organic compounds. But I'm sure it just breaks down to that. But there are an unknown, unspecified quantity and diversity of these things that I don't think, like, no two berries are going to be exactly the same.
Yeah.
So how the hell are you going to do that? You're going to homogenize the whole damn thing. It's ridiculous. Like, I don't know. It's just that kind of thing.
It's like,
I don't know.
It's like arguing with someone about like, and you will be able to catch me on this metaphor as soon as it's inaccurate, because you know a lot more about it than I do. But it's like arguing with someone about like the realities of complex mathematics, where you're like knowing a whole lot about like about linear algebra or a multivariable or tensor calculus is great. You know a lot about that language for articulating these things, which correlate as well as you can tell to things that exist in the world. Like, there are things that you can describe with that language very accurately or predict pretty well in a lot of cases. That's what people want to use it for a lot. But the physical reality that actually exists is so much greater than that language. Like, the thing that is out there is itself real, and you're just trying to develop a language to describe it. And the same is true for
it's just tools.
Yeah, and you have a limited set of tools to approach a basically infinite problem. And to some degree, and it's very like it's not infinite, but to the same degree, biochemistry or chemistry or biology, or even like horticulture and all of these other things, and then enology and winemaking as a whole, is this set of discrete tools, these discrete things we understand about organic chemistry and science, meant to combat a just physical fact, which is the season as it is grown through, wine grapes. So suggesting that the one is definitively beholden to the other doesn't work both ways. Like, it works one way very, very well, but then the other way, it's a pretty hubristic. I don't even know if that's a word. It's like a pretty arrogant statement to be like, oh yeah, well, because I know these things about biochemistry, these are the things that are happening in this wine. And to a great degree, that is usually true. Like, it's really, really important. Like, there are a lot of people with degrees in winemaking who understand those things a lot better than I do. But they usually, in my experience, the people who apprehend all that really well are not interested in replacing what happens naturally with that whole process with the things that they know, because the things that they know are only to make sure that they can get the most out of that process, and ultimately getting the most out of that process is to create a wine that's as honest and clear as possible to to be a thing that somebody can enjoy. Like, like there's a great, I don't know if it's, like, I feel like I've heard someone say this, but it's like, oh yeah, well, like, wine it's not about making beer out of wine or something. Like, if people want to drink beer instead, they just drink beer. But wine is supposed to be this particular thing that still enchants people and is really, really amazing.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
And to do that as truly as possible, like the relationship between vineyards and wineries is a very special relationship in, like, I don't know, food technology. But one that I don't know enough about food technology to, like, describe what I mean by that. But it's certainly different than, like, there aren't farms that produce barley and wheat and whatever to make beer. There are a minute number of projects in the world like that, whereas, like, basically every vineyard is like you there are a number of wineries, but they're pretty pretty widely regarded as, like, not good. That they're like, oh, we don't know which vineyard this wine came from. It's like,
right. I think it's a pretty, like, old world thing, because I remember I was reading some book about beer. Some guy who wrote a book who was, like, started, like, the Cicerone Academy or some shit. I don't know, but he was talking about, it's like, basically there's, like, I don't know, 4 ingredients or 3 ingredients that go into beer. It was like the grain, water, yeast, and I'm sure hops. So the 4.
Yep.
And he's like, and the only one that really makes a difference, like, consistently that defines a style, is the water. So that you could argue, like, okay, that's, like, terroir, and obviously there's certain differentiating styles, but it's like, okay, that's why, like, English beer will taste different than, like, Belgian beer, or, like, like, all this different kind of stuff. Not one of the main reasons. And so I think maybe it's a American perspective when you're making, I don't know, beer in the middle of, like, New Jersey or something, to be like, I've had some good beer made from New Jersey, but it's, I don't know if they're using that water. I don't know if they're treating it into a certain to a certain condition, because if so, then that's sort of like what that guy's saying, because, like, all right, technically, yeah, if you want to measure these certain compounds, whatever, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So yeah. Anyway, getting back to Peeno. So so the one that I have is, like, the Burgundy, the Philippe Livera. Is that sort of, like, really that, like, pretty fresh dried, transparent, like, crystal clear, like, delicious cherry. It's like a little floral and really nice, and then standard, like, herbs and mushroomy, forest flory kind of, like, not like chalky, but, like, you ever have those, like, not Tums, but, like, the edible, like, the Flintstone vitamins, like that chalk, like the purple one, just that, like, the smell of that kind of. So those sorts of things. And so that's one different way. We were talking about minerality last time. Like, that's one way I might describe it. Like, oh, that smells really mineral. It has that sort of, like, chalky. Maybe it's because the texture. I don't know. But so that sort of thing, and then on the palate, it's a bit different. I mean, it's still lighter, really good acid. A little bit like it's. See, what I like about red burgundy when it's done right is it'll have a mixture between like sort of lift from the acid, but also like a tongue coating sort of sensation, and that body from the right like balance of alcohol.
Yeah,
and just like a subtle suggestion of oak, not like here it is or there's none, but it's like it provides some sort of like a little bit of structure and backbone, but it's definitely not taking the center stage.
Yeah,
and it's sort of like whatever. So do you want to say what your Oregon was like, and then I'll do California last, so we sort of have that like spectrum.
Yeah. So this is mine's also, it's pretty lean. Like it has it has that like ripe cherry thing going on, like dark cherry. And just a really good acid balance. Like you were saying, it's not got quite like anything. It's got a tongue coating quality to it, but it's very ephemeral. Like that its grip is very it doesn't have a lot of goo to its grip. Like it clings but then releases. Like there's a distinct
does that point what the acid sort of helps like sort of clear it from your palate, makes you salivate and takes it away probably.
Yeah, it has good salinity. It's just so it to me rings very delicious. Very, very holy. Like it's delicious. Like it rings to this very true core of what Pinot Noir is, in its like in the average of all of Pinot Noir's flavors and abilities to like to exist somewhere on that just ripe blackberry, well ripe dark cherry, fully fleshed, fully developed tannins, and like sort of just enough acidity to like keep things moving. It's just riding that perfect. It's not the best Pinot I've ever had. Like it's not something awe-inspiring, but it's just a very it's such a good whole clean expression of Pinot Noir.
It's there, Willamette Valley.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's $35. Nice. Like that's where they start. But yeah, it's just like
so good.
That's it. Are you smelling the Anto Farms one or the?
No, I'm still smelling the burgundy. Yeah. Like what? Like so people were saying, people talk a lot. People who like whatever richer wines and whatever. I don't really get Pinot or whatever. It's like they're like, oh yeah, it doesn't smell like anything. Like I was in it was a year ago, a little more than a year ago, when I did that trip to Walla Walla, and then I went down to Willamette. And the first day, like whatever, because I remember I was up there for like 3 or 4 days, and I was just like Cabs, Syrahs, Grenache, Mourvedre, Cab Franc, Merlot, like all just like huge wines. I remember going to sleep one night after like tasting all day, and I like closed my eyes, and I could just feel like my tongue hurt. Yeah. I was like, I didn't realize that my tongue hurt all day, but it's just like, I've just been spitting wine all day. And but then I went down, and the first winery I went to was Grand Marine. And I tried, whatever their first Pinot, and it tasted like nothing. Yeah. It smelled and tasted like nothing. And it's like, no, I've had this wine before, and I love it. What is going on? And it took me like, I don't know, 10 minutes for my palate to like acclimate or something. And I was like, oh, okay, no, I'm back. I'm good. But I could see if you drink that stuff your whole life or whatever, for however your whole like time you've been drinking wine, you would try this and be like, it doesn't taste like anything. Yeah. But to me, it has that one thing I love about Burgundy that I was actually thinking about earlier today was that, or just a lot of wines that I like in general, they have this like really like this concentration, but they're not extracted. So like this concentrated in terms of like the intensity of their particular aromas. Yeah. But it's not heavy. Yeah. And that same way, like Gewürztraminer can be too heavy in terms of its like expression. Absolutely. That when I was telling you about that Willem, the Grand Cru Gewürz, it's like it's concentrated in super mineral, and it's not really in your face. It's reserved, but it's like the more you sort of smell it and sit with it, the more it sort of like expresses and opens up to you, and it's like it's beautiful. And that's why I think like Pinot is a at least Old World in Oregon too, and styles that are done really well. Some in California. It's like it's a really like intimate sort of experience. Not to say that like what like having a cab with a steak like isn't intimate, but to me it's like I could literally just sit here by myself and just smell this.
Yeah.
And be like, oh god, this is so fucking
No,
good.
it's all about like the delicacy of it.
Yeah. And so that's one thing when I feel like people tend to throw too much oak or like put their hands too much in the wine, so to speak, and or they let it get too ripe or whatever. It's not like it loses that, and it's like it's certainly delicious like party juice,
Yeah.
But I would rather spend the money on getting party juice. If I'm gonna have party juice, I'm gonna get something else,
Yeah.
But yeah,
it's such a like. I don't know. I feel like Pinot Noir is so deeply. I haven't watched Sideways.
I saw it like a while ago, but
yeah, but like, I feel like at the core of how people who love wine sell wine to people who don't yet. There's like this. Yeah. There's this. Once you get to that evangelical stage of like there are plenty of people out there who don't need to be convinced to like wine. They like wine. They just like wine that's not complicated. They just like it because it's wine. And those people would be harder for a Pinot Noir lover to get to, because they're like, no, I like wine. Pinot's fine, but I have these other ones. Then you have to build like this level of like trust away from something that's already good enough for them. Like they don't need something all that complicated to enjoy wine. But then there are people who are like, I don't think I like wine, and they've had like cheap or like low quality wine and found it offensive, and somebody who really loves wine is basically saying like, look, I want to walk you to an appreciation of Pinot Noir because it is the one that, if you want something subtle, that's what you want. And it's what you're saying, like it's so good with food, but you don't need food for it to be good. Like you can just sit and dither about it for like hours with someone, and the conversation won't suck because the wine doesn't suck if it's good Pinot Noir.
Right. Yeah, and like I have this bottle of Toro over here. We should do Spain at some point, or just whatever, Tempranillo or something. But I have this bottle here, and it's enormous. It's like the biggest bottle of wine. I mean, not on the side. I told you about this. It's like 750 milliliters normal, but like in terms of not even like the tannins, but just like I don't even know what the alcohol. It probably says like 15 on the bottles, but it's probably like 17. It's huge, and it's like super extracted, and it has like 10 or 12 years of bottle age on it, so the tannins aren't super strong, and still has good acid surprisingly, but it's like. It's just big. Huge. Yeah. It's so big, and it's like, all right, it's delicious with, really interesting, with blue cheese, it's delicious. Nice. And with meat, obviously, it's delicious, so you put the blue cheese on a steak. If you're not a piece of shit, you gotta eat that. It's fucking amazing. And, no offense to anybody whose religion that violates, I'm just saying, Anyway.
Just saying, you're a piece of shit.
I'm just saying you're a piece of shit. But, but yeah, but I couldn't just sit down and whatever, and just watch a movie or a show or whatever, or read a book and have a glass of that. Yeah. It's ridiculous. It's insane. It's like trying to walk around your apartment wearing skis. It's insane. You can't do anything. You can do it, but it's so no, you can't. But with with Pinot Noir, it's just like, all right, yeah. And plus, I think it helps that you can put a little bit of chill on it. It helps it, and it's like, I don't know. Yeah. But
have you
sorry, go ahead. I was going to talk about the California Pinot. But...
Oh no, you should do that. I was about to make a weird, useless analogy just because there's another thing I wanted to talk about, but we should stick with wine.
Okay, sweet. We can get to that after. Yeah. So yeah, the Anthill Farms Pinot, 2016 Sonoma Coast. So it's sort of their equivalent of the Willamette Valley. Yeah. And it's. I'm just gonna say. See, I already feel like people are like, oh, he doesn't like it, and it's like, all right, let me let it speak for itself here. So it's
just,
much
just
riper.
throw it on your microphone. It's like, there. That's what I had to say.
Enough said. No, so it's definitely it's a lot riper.
Yeah.
It still has, it's just that like it's got this pretty strong oak influence where it almost makes it smell like resiny or like sappy.
Right.
Or like syrupy kind of.
Yeah.
And it's like that beautiful like lift and delicacy that I would normally like I have with the Burgundy. It's not there.
Yeah.
But like you can smell like there still is the really nice like perfumed like floral characteristics and like the bright fruit.
All of
but
them.
Then there's that rich backbone.
Yeah. All the flavor molecules are still there, but they're playing differently because the wine is a fundamentally different pH, probably.
Probably, yeah. A bit. I mean, it's weird because I don't think it feels much richer. Like it's probably similar. It's probably slightly higher in alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe because it is their Sonoma Coast, it probably isn't as good a quality of fruit that, relatively speaking, that goes into the Côte de Nuit, rather than they're just like Bourgogne Rouge or something. But same thing, similar price point. I think I actually paid more for the Anthill Farm than I did for the Bottle of Burgundy.
I'd be surprised if you didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Just based on what Anthill Farm says about like how their wines go out.
Yeah. And it's like, I mean, it's delicious. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, it's not good. It's just like rich. It's kind of like the same feeling you have when you eat like a piece of like milk chocolate. And it's sort of like you swallow whatever and it's still in your mouth a little bit, that lingering like richness.
Yeah.
That's what it's like on the palate.
So it's like,
so to me, it kind of...
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Well, I feel like one thing that certainly would be true. So I think Oregon splits the difference on this one, but I think that California and France can be set apart from each other in that fruit commonly comes off in a kind of jammy way from Pinot Noir from California. Like that's sort of where the fruit flavors exist, or sort of the medium through which you feel like you're experiencing them.
Yeah.
As opposed to French Pinot, where I feel like generally there, my experiences of like fresh fruit on a pastry or like a freshly made like highly acidic compote where like all that has gone into it is sugar and fruit. Like on the sweeter ones, like on the ones with a little bit of like oak toast to juice that up. But
or like a fruit mousse, like a raspberry mousse, or like a passion fruit mousse or that sort of thing. Where if there is that bit of richness, or that's kind of sometimes how I feel about Chablis.
Yep.
It'll be that like Chablis that has oak on it. It'll have that like richness, that roundness and richness, but then it'll still have that like striking acid that goes through it. And I think it's really delicious.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that freshness and that like drive, and this is of course talking about really good examples. Yeah, and you know, I don't want that to sound like I'm not ragging on California for that. I'm just saying that it's a different like there is a different expression to how Pinot grows there, and it really just has to do with like what the climate is like. Like it's a big part of what the climate is like. Like the Oregon industry exists, but this is an exaggeration, but a big part of the Eyrie exists. I can say the Eyrie exists because when he was at UC Davis, David Lett had a professor say like there are not many places in California that get cold enough consistently to grow Pinot Noir in an old world style. Yeah. And it's in California, so he was like, okay, and he just looked at the map and was like, what if I go to Oregon and do it there? Yeah. Right. And you know, that was literally it. He was like looking for a place where it was just basically colder and wetter, but in an averaged out way. Because he didn't want to have that kind of expression. I think people have gotten pretty good at managing to like create Pinot Noir with its own expression out of California. Like I think California Pinot Noir is a valuable type of wine, but there is a fundamental difference in fruit expression, at least as far as I've ever seen.
Right, and I think you kind of have to. It's hard because people like when you go into a wine shop, you'll just see like, oh, Pinot Noir, and you're like, oh, from whatever, and you pick it up and you buy it. It's like whatever, $20 or $15 or $30 or whatever, and then you buy it and it says like in small letters like Sonoma Coast, and then when you buy and it says like Alsace or something, you know, and you're like, oh, whatever, what's the difference? And you get it, and you're like, whoa, this is totally fucking different. And it's like, it's hard because, technically it is the same thing. They're the same grape. Mm-hmm. But you have to treat them like they're different, completely different products.
Well, and a good example of that's like, in other New World terminology, like there are parts of Australia that can grow Pinot Noir and grow it really, really well. Yeah. And other parts of Australia which functionally can't. Like, you just can't, you can't expect Pinot to grow... in some of those climes that they're doing Shiraz.
Right.
But the backside of all of that is like, it just, and it's part of what makes Pinot tricky is like Pinot is a varietal. Pinot Noir is a varietal that people want to grow. Like they have a drive to take that varietal, stick it in the ground, and make it happen, and make part of their region's clout built on that. And there's so many other varietals it's the thing that people, I think, kind of get freaked out about wine with, because there are these big terms in wine like Chardonnay and Pinot Noir and Cabernet Sauvignon, and like the words that are supposed to go with good wines, the wines that you're supposed to like. And then there's the complications of like, then you have the complications from the other side, which is like, oh, but I've heard that in Italy, Barbarescos and Barolos are really good. And then you find out that those are all the same grape. And figuring out how to navigate, what, like the best way to really enjoy wine the most, I think, in terms of like having a budget for it, is looking at interesting varietals being grown in a space that you wouldn't quite expect that to happen, but seems like it could work. But that's like really, like, that's something that you and I do, but it's really hard for people to like feel that level of like affinity with stuff, because other times it's a bust as well. But like, if somebody is growing Chenin Blanc in a place that like Southern Oregon, that might be going really well for them depending on where their farm is, and it could be really cool. You won't know until you try the wine, but that was a huge departure. But like, the idea. So the thing I was gonna say is like, in New Zealand, the Pinot Noirs grown in Central Otago are pretty markedly different from the Pinot Noirs grown up near Wellington and like Martinborough or other North Island areas. And like, it's New Zealand. It's a small geographic space.
Yeah.
World-wise, but in terms of climate, like, climates are very specific to pretty small regions, and that has a lot to do with geography. And like, there's a lot of subtle fact about the shape of fucking New Zealand that make those two places markedly different. And
right.
That's what we were talking about at the beginning with terroir. Is like, terroir comes down to those things that are like, they're just facts of the place and how the plant is going to grow, that don't care at all about what you do.
Yeah.
Until you start doing it to the plant. So.
Right. Yeah. I wanted to get, because just from personal preference, I like the only Pinots that I've really had that, I've liked. Yeah. From California have been from Anderson Valley.
Yeah.
And like I was telling you, the Copain the other day, their Pinots, I had a couple of their Pinots, they're good. I mean, they're definitely like New World Pinots. They're definitely like California Pinots, but they're, they preserve acid. They're not trying to be something other than what they are. They're like, no, like, we know it's warmer than it would be in the Côte d'Or, so we're going to embrace that, and we're not going to try to force anything. And as a result, you're going to be getting this really like delicious wine, and it has all the same like earthy characteristics. You can taste the barrel influence, but it's not like beating you over the head. Like I feel like with the Sonoma Coast, like the Sandhill Farm Pinot, the barrel influence doesn't match what the wine is.
Interesting.
It's kind of like dissonant, dissonant a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like I would want this barrel for like maybe like Syrah or something like that would be really cool.
Yeah.
You know, but not for this Pinot.
Well, based on their website, it sounds like they also like make a lot of Syrah. It's like they seem like they're on the like the heavier side of the spectrum in terms of where they like, you know, they think. So that's the other problem with wine technology is that like when you have a comfort zone, that's where your techniques come from. That's what, you know. It's like it's camp, but there are a lot of ways that wine can be related to music in terms of like how it's produced and the way how it expresses. And that's a good example of like if your thing is fucking sludge metal, then you're going to know a lot about the techniques of how to play sludge metal, but you're gonna be tripped up by the chord changes that are important to jazz. And there, you know, of course, there are in music all these cool places where those like can overlap and do. I'm not thinking of them off the top of my head for the example I've come up with. I can't recommend any sludge metal jazz, but
sludge metal, no, me neither.
I don't even know if sludge metal is a real musical.
I mean, I hope it is. That'd be great.
It's, I don't know, Norwegian death metal maybe.
Yeah, it's a certified.
Yeah. That's definitely real.
Yep, that's the thing.
But like wine's the same way as like if you have a lot of sensitivity to, I mean, this was something we were talking about last time, but like if you have a lot of sensitivity to French oak barrels and the different expressions you get out of different French oak barrels, great. Yeah. But that's the kind of thing that a Pinot Noir producer would have if you are using them for Pinot Noir. Like you could have a French oak profile for what it does to Chardonnay, and that's a functionally different set of, like, in musical terms, scales. That's a whole different, you know, that's a whole different pattern than how it relates to Pinot Noir barrels. And the same is true for like Cab Sauv and Carmenere and Syrah. So if you you know, if you have a barrel program for Syrah, it probably looks different than your barrel program for Pinot Noir.